Maximillion Mouse and the Coat Adventure by Dawn Wheeler. Maximillion Mouse found himself in the most wonderful strawberry patch. In front of him was the biggest, juiciest strawberry he had ever seen. Max was about to take a bite when a loud whack startled him. Whack, whack! It sounded again. Max's strawberry began to fade away right in front of him until it was completely gone. Now in his hands was just his crumpled up blanket. Oh darn, it was all just a dream. Max was now looking at the walls inside his little treehouse. The strawberry patch had disappeared. Max's belly growled. He was hungry after seeing all those juicy strawberries, so he decided it was time to get out of bed and go search for some food. Max heard the noise again. Whack, whack! It was a tree branch banging against his treehouse. Fall winds were blowing hard today. Winter would be here very soon. Max put on his warm green coat and went outside to search for some yummy acorns. They were one of his favorite foods. Max walked out into the oak forest near his home and searched under the leaves for some acorns. He spied the tip of an acorn under some leaves. Yes, he shouted and began to dig it out of the leaves. It was perfect, big and juicy. Max's mouth began to water as he thought about eating the acorn. That was until Max heard the noise that no mouse ever wanted to hear. It was a hawk, and it was headed straight for him. Max dropped the acorn and ran for safety, but it was too late. The hawk sank his claws into Max's back. Rip! Max's coat was shredded. The back of Max's coat was torn right off of him by the hawk. Max looked behind him and then took off like lightning. He ran as fast as he could back to the safety of his home. Phew! That was a close one. Max's heart was thumping very fast. He had never been so scared. Max was happy to be alive and safe in his treehouse. Whack, whack! The wind howled again, making the branch bang on Max's house. A shiver ran up Max's back. He thought about the cold winter and wished his coat was not all ripped up. He was going to have to find a new coat before it snowed, and he knew just where to go. Max peeked outside and saw that it was now safe, so he headed out on a trip to visit his cousin Maximillion Mouse. Max hiked for hours and hours, carefully keeping a lookout for another hawk. He was still very shaken up and sore from the little scratches on his back. This reminded him that it was best to walk quietly while keeping an eye on the sky. It was almost dark when Max stumbled on an old jar filled with moss and leaves. This would be the perfect spot to spend the night. Max gathered some more moss and an acorn, then dragged it all into the jar. He then stuffed the jar opening with the extra moss so that it would close up, just like a front door. Now Max felt safe. He nibbled on his acorn, then suddenly felt very sleepy. Max snuggled into the moss and was quickly sound asleep. Max had a wonderful rest and was up bright and early. His glass house allowed him to see daylight as soon as the sun peeked over the hills. Max hiked for most of the day when he finally made it to his cousin's home. Max snuck under the big white house's front porch and found the little door to his cousin Mortski's cozy home. Max was greeted by Maximillion Mouse with surprise and joy. "Morty!" Max shouted. "Maximillion!" Maximillion shouted. Both mice did their mouse tail shake greeting and then hugged. It had been a couple of years since they had seen each other, but it was just like yesterday in their hearts. Max was very happy to see his cousin, who was his good friend. Max told Morty about the awful hawk and how it had ripped his coat to shreds. He was hoping that Morty would help him get some fabric for a new coat. Maximillion Mouse smiled and scampered off to his storage area. He returned to Max with a bright pink sock. "Will this work? The fabric is thick and soft. It would make a very warm coat," said Maximillion Mouse. Max did not like that color at all. Every predator in the forest would see him if he wore that. Max shook his head. This sock just would not work. Maximillion told Max that they could probably find something else in the laundry room, but it would be a dangerous adventure to get there. You see, they would have to go past the fireplace to get to the laundry room, and a very large cat liked to sleep in front of the fireplace. Now that the weather was getting colder, the cat rarely left the cozy rug that was next to the warm fire. Max really needed a new coat, so he said he was willing to try if Morty would go with him. So both mice snuck very quietly into the den. The cat was fast asleep, and both mice were able to quickly sneak into the next room. Max's nose began to twitch and his belly grumbled. They were now in the dining room, and the most wonderful smells were coming from on top of the table. Max and Morty climbed the leg and onto the table. They just had to see what was making all the wonderful smells. Max and Morty's eyes went wide when they saw what was on the table. A warm, steaming pie and a plate full of cookies sat in front of them. Max ran to the cookies and tasted one. Mmm, peanut butter flavored cookies. How delicious. Max ran to the pie and took a nibble. Blueberry, even better than the cookie, he thought. Then he ran over to the little cup on the table. It smelled so tasty that he just had to see what was inside. This was not a good idea, however, because when Max peeped over the edge to see what was inside, the cup tipped over and all the brown water spilled everywhere. The pretty orange tablecloth was now brown, and so was Max. He even got some of the brown water in his mouth. Yuck! This did not taste as good as it smelled. How could something smell so good but taste so bitter? Max ran over to the cookies so that he could get the brown water taste out of his mouth when he was stopped in his tracks by a large cat's paw. Yikes! Max yelled and darted in the other direction. The cat jumped towards Max and the cookies flew everywhere. This made the cat look at the flying cookies, so Max was able to quickly leap off the table. Max ran to the closest place he could find to hide, the great big china closet that was in the room with the fireplace. Max crawled inside a teacup and hid. His little heart was beating fast again. This was worse than the escape from the hawk. Max was frozen in fear. Max hid in the teacup for a very long time. Hours passed before he dared to even peek over the edge of the cup. When Max finally did climb out of the cup, it was the middle of the night. The fire was out, but the red coals shined enough light that Max could see there was no longer a cat on the carpet in front of the fire. The cat must have found a new, warmer place to sleep. Max snuck out of the china closet and found his way back to Morty's home. Mortsky Mouse was very happy to see Max. "Hooray! You're alive!" Morty shouted. Morty asked Max if he wanted to go try and find a sock again, but Max shook his head. He did not want to take another walk into the cat's lair. Once was enough for his lifetime. Max decided that the pink sock would be just fine and said goodbye to his cousin Mortsky Mouse. Max had an idea of how to make the pink sock work, but first he had to find a mud puddle. Max hiked for quite a while with the pink sock. It was a very scary hike because the pink sock did not blend in with the forest colors. In fact, it stuck out like a sore thumb. Every creature he passed saw him and stared with wide eyes. Finally, he found a nice muddy puddle and threw the pink sock in it. The pink color was quickly replaced by a nice shade of brown. This sock was now the perfect color to blend in with the forest. Max found the glass jar that he had stayed in and spent another night in the jar while his brown sock dried in the night air. In the morning, he headed straight home. When Max reached the safety of his treehouse, he immediately got to work on his new coat. He cut holes and sewed with his giant needle. When he was done, he had something that looked like a jacket with a hood. This coat was even better than the old one. It was much thicker and would be sure to keep him warm. It was also the perfect color, different shades of brown that looked just like the leaves on the forest floor. No hawk would ever see him in this. Max chewed on an acorn and then climbed into his bed. What an adventure the last few days had been. He was asleep in seconds, dreaming about big, fat, juicy strawberries. And that's the end, my friends. If you really like this story, be sure to check us out on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, where you can get your own copy of this book. Thanks, everyone.